within India while addressing her rights? And also, are there concerns related to the geopolitical location of Muslims and the Muslim nations as such when we talk about rights of women in Islam? What are the interests that get into in framing Muslim women as victims of a pre-modern religion? Maybe I'll begin from that, but I also, so I want to say that feminism is, of course, a moment that talks about the rights of women. It was an important moment emerged in a very modern context, but at the same time, feminism cannot represent women universally across borders. And of late, within feminism, we are talking about rights of women from different categories. In India, we talk about addressing Muslim women, Dalit women, women from different marginalized communities as different categories, and we also try to separate from something called the mainstream feminism. So I would like to call this kind of a messy mediation that mainstream feminism does with women of marginalized communities. So I would like to see how Muslim women inflect feminist histories and Muslim women's position in a particular situation, Muslim women's political position in India especially. How does that affect the destiny and also the way in which Muslim women has been discussed in legal and academic and all kinds of, in the context of media representations, etc. So let me bring your attention to a particular case. This is not, I'm not going to talk about the Triple Talaq case, or I'm not talking about Shah Banu, but I want to talk about something called the Imrana case, which came up in the Supreme Court 2 years before. And the Imrana case was interesting because what happened was there was an appeal in the PAL was filed in the Supreme Court by a lawyer named Vishwalojan Madan to abolish Sharia courts established by Muslim Personal Law Board, as their verdicts, he claimed, were often anti-feminist and also gave guidelines to institutions like Darul, were often anti-feminist. So Supreme Court, while Supreme Court rejected this petition, but at the same time Supreme Court gave guidelines to institutions like Darul Khuda and Darul Ifta regarding discretions to be adopted while giving fatwas. This was in the context of a case of this woman Imrana. She was raped by her father-in-law, and then a fatwa was issued. That her father-in-law should marry her. And against this lawyer went to Supreme Court and filed the PIL. This is the context. And immediately the Supreme Court rejected the appeal to demolish or appeal to abolish Sharia courts. But at the same time, Supreme Court advised the Sharia courts to be more discreet in giving fatwas. Now, this was taken in two different ways by the media. On one side, media celebrated it, saying, one group of people celebrated it, saying, see, the Supreme Court is against the Sharia courts. But at the same time, the Personal Law Board came up and said, no, this is a victory for us because the Supreme Court didn't in any way abolish the Sharia courts. So they were kind of celebrating this as a victory. So this two positions in some ways is like, presenting the present destiny of Muslim women in India. On one side, there is a very conservative religious orthodoxy which would talk about Muslim women in certain very hardcore religious indoctrinated kind of situation. And on the other way, you have a very secular kind of public, the mainstream public, which would want to look at Islam as a pre-modern section, which would want to talk about Muslim women just to represent Islam as a pre-modern, archaic kind of a framework. So these within, but what happened exactly with this case was Imrana and her husband, they didn't follow the fatwa. They actually disobeyed the fatwa. They went to the court, got the father-in-law arrested for raping this woman. So there is always a third choice, a choice of going to the Criminal Legal Procedure Code of this country if you feel that there is a violation of your rights. So there is always a choice before Muslim women to go to the secular state whenever there is a violation. So new laws within the personal legal system, I don't know, like I'm not much in support of kind of like, this increased demand of law reforms and law reforms and law reforms. Rather, it would be better to point out what are the ways in which Muslim women can access the existing legal procedure code of the country. That's one point I wanted to point out while talking about this particular case. But now, when we move from Shabanu to Imrana to the current situation, the complexity of the situation is that all these do not take into consideration what would be the plight of Muslim women or what is the destiny of Muslim women in all these discussions. We will be talking about the rights, we will be saying that Islam is like a very liberal religion, Islamic exegesis. We have come across a whole lot of male Islamic scholars who talk about the liberal values of Islam. We have also heard people like Amina Wadud who would say Quran is very liberal and women friendly. But how is this practiced? How is this taken forward? And how women have ways of negotiating this particular aspect of religion, that is more important in the lived context or in the lived reality of Muslim women, whether it's in India or elsewhere. And the campaigns to save Muslim women often come from different kinds of interests, as we have seen in the international level. For instance, we have seen campaigns coming up like Save Afghan Women, Save Muslim Women, the veiled picture of Muslim women coming up in the front pages of magazines. All these are in ways serving certain kinds of geopolitical interests, supporting certain kinds of interests the imperialist forces have in the Middle East. Yeah, just to sum up what I want to say, I would want to say that there is a kind of rhetorical trick that is happening when it comes to the status of Muslim women. On one side, there is a kind of glorification of rights in Islam, and on the other side, there is a very polemical kind of stand which would say, Islam is like not women friendly. And between these two, this is also a very risky position for Muslim women, because it is also in certain ways erasing the context in which Muslim women live in India. Flavia has extensively pointed out the political reality of Muslims in India. While we are talking about the rights within Islam and the kind of reforms that are needed within this religion, we are in some way moving away from the political reality of Muslims in India. How privileged are the Muslim community in India to talk more in terms of reforms than in terms of their own political existence in this country? Does the mainstream, especially in a very Hindutva kind of regime, do Muslims have that kind of a liberty or a luxury? I would call it a luxury. A community which is in the verge of fear and in the verge of like threat of annihilation. I don't know, I'm not sure whether they can talk more and more about reforms. Rather, the community is more concentrated. If the community is not taking up the question of women's reform, as the mainstream is accusing them, the mainstream should also think about the existence of this political existence of this community and the insecurity that this community faces in the current political situation in India. Thank you. I teach in English and Foreign Language University.
Because Mrs. Professor Chandok and Sherwani Sahib had also said it very forcefully. The problem, sir, is that in this country we have religious-based personal laws. Now the law was adopted, the enactment was made in 1937, but the age of these laws were written in 9th and 10th century. Since this is the law of the land, this is not codified. If I have to make the point that certain provisions are not good, who is going to accept me unless I show that it is repugnant not only to the Constitution? I am making this statement subject to the approval of Tahir Bhai. If Tahir Bhai is not in agreement, I will withdraw it. Honestly. If he is not in agreement, I will withdraw this statement. Unless I am able to show that it is not only repugnant to the provisions, fundamental rights of the Constitution, but also violates the spirit, the provision and spirit of the Quran, they will,
in spirit.
Letter and spirit of the Quran, then they will declare me to be a kafir. How I am going to face them? Even Faizan Sahib will be fearful, and he will not be inviting me in the next seminar here. Faizan Sahib khud bhi bahar hai, koi problem nahi. So this is the problem. In fact, I would like to remind you that Sir Syed was extremely impressed by Tatler and Spectator, two magazines of UK. These were magazines which dealt with the issues of social reforms in response to the demands of the time. As you said, we are living in 21st century. But then what he had to do? He has himself written. If I ask them to do this thing, which in my opinion is good, they tell me it goes against Quran. If I tell them not to do something, they say this is exactly in accordance with Quran. This is in accordance with the religion. Then I search in the Quran, and then I try to find the provisions which can show them that what they consider religious actually violates the Quran. And what they oppose, that is what Quran exhorts them to do. This at least I have, because I am engaged in this fight since last 30 years. And I feel that if still I am relevant mainly because I am relying in this fight on Quran. If I were not relying on Quran, I would have been out of this fight long back. That is the problem. Secondly, the last speaker and Professor John Dayal, they talked about community being under siege, Hindutva. 1986, who was under siege? What was the attitude in 1986? We had a very modern, very young Prime Minister, very forward-looking Prime Minister, who wrote on the file, there is no way any compromise can be made with the fundamentalist forces. But then the fury of the separatist voice was so strong. There was no Hindutva, there were only 2 MPs of BJP. So this, to my mind, is an alibi only to spite somebody who hates me. I'm not going to cut my nose. To me, and this to Mrs. Flavia, to me, triple divorce is no ordinary matter. This is an enormity. This must go at the earliest. Even in Shahbano case, the real issue was triple divorce. If her husband had not given her, first he deserted her, the day, he did not divorce her. He deserted her. After 3 years, she was living without any means. She had nothing to keep her body and soul together. When she seeks relief from the court and the notice goes to the husband says, he pronounces 3 divorces to deny her the legal right to seek relief from the court. How are you going to check these abuses of the law? Hazrat Umar used to award a punishment of 40 lashes. In fact, I am very glad today that in few discussions, the representatives of the Muslim Personal Law Board, they agree. I said, okay, I am not going to speak against triple talaq. What Hazrat Umar, he used to allow it, but at the same time, he used to award a punishment of 40 lashes. Now let us, we can't lash anybody today. So let us make a law, you demand, together we should demand a law that such person should be punished. If he pronounces 3 divorces in one sitting, let him go to jail for 3 years. Nobody will give nobody then will pronounce 3 divorces. This was only for clarification. Now Patil Sahib, please. But with the approval of Tahir Bhai. Otherwise I will withdraw my statement. इसीलिए तो नहीं वो डिसएग्रीमेंट नहीं है वहां. आपसे डिसएग्रीमेंट हो सकता है, उनके अप्रूवल से बोलूंगा, नहीं तो विड्रॉ कर लूंगा. हाँ बस ही. Bhai, he is senior. He is senior. Ji.
Yes, sir. Lots of speakers have expressed anguish regarding the enforcement mechanism being a failure. Judgments come about from the Supreme Court, but then the enforcement is lacking, especially when it comes to the sexual abuse of women in this country, starting from Delhi, in Godhra, everywhere else. I would like to share my own experiments with this sexual as a feminist. Unless we become proactive, that requires a lot of grit, intellectual grit again, we will be a suffering society like this. I have Shahida by my side. She is a direct witness of the revolution which I did in Gulbarga University campus regarding the sexual abuse. No, there I am not. But this is first point. So if we are developing the kind of a social action group which I did in Gulbarga University, everywhere else, whether it is JNU or wherever, then it should be possible for us. Legal has to be correlated with social action groups. That is number one. Number two, I have been insisting that we are only restrictive in our expressions today on men and women perhaps more than men. But then what about the others? Others who are trying to take, in India, transgenders are suffering, no property rights, no social status, no any kind of a, the legality, social, not whatever. And the way they have been thrown out of the houses, they are simply thrown out because they are transgenders. They are on the stage, they are on the railway stations, they are in the railway bogies, and then we say that they are harassing us. These are the issues which have to take center stage during our times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is only a suggestion. So, this is only kind of any other question? Ji, Sherwani sir.
I know I have to be brief. However, sir, what you have said is absolutely right. The difficulty is there. But please tell me, and Dr. Faizan Mustafa Sahab, ulema ko karna hai. Who are the ulema? From where have they become the ulema? When Narendra Modi's degrees are being checked, Smriti Irani's degrees are being checked, has anyone checked the degrees of these ulema? My pardada was mufti, my dada was mufti, my bap was mufti, I am mufti. Your pardada may have been the real mufti, but after that all three are muft ke muftis.
Mufti.
And we don't want these muft ke muftis anymore. Let there be. What about, Arey bhai, Supreme Court ke Justice Muhammad Hidayatullah, uske baad Hamidullah Beg, uske baad, I mean, so many other people, Tahir Mahmood Saab. अरे अगर शरिया कोर्ट्स भी बने, ये लोग होने चाहिए, आप होने चाहिए. मैं तो कहता हूं शरिया कोर्ट्स में रश्मि साहिबा होनी चाहिए, she knows more about शरीयत. फ्लैविया होनी चाहिए, she knows more about शरीयत than these Neem Mullah खतरे ईमान know. And when will the day come when change will take place? This is absolutely intolerable. I am 85 years old. I don't want to die leaving this mess. Sorry.
सर कोई क्वेश्चन तो नहीं आपका है? एक कर लो सर.
No, sir, the problem is that this is not that easy. It's quite a nuanced position which some people, including me, have taken. So there are part of personal law which have been enacted, say the Shariat Act or the Dissolution of Muslim Marriage Act of 1939 or the 86 Act about which Flavia was making a reference. Now about legality of these laws, that they are laws, there is no dispute because legislature enacted them. Now there are parts of uncodified Muslim law to which you also made a reference. Now whether they are laws within the meaning of Article 13 is a question. Now I am not the only one, even though for saying that they are not laws, our feminist friends and the Hindu rightist friend call me an Islamist, and for denying divinity to entire Muslim law, my Muslim friends call me a non-believer. The problem is this: if they are not laws and there are decisions to this effect, Narsu Appamalli decision of Gajendra Gatkar and Justice Chagla, followed in Mathura Ahir and the Ahmedabad Women Action Group. So Supreme Court has also accepted this, that they are not laws in that sense. Now, if Muslim law, which you have also accepted, that these laws are in the schools, the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa or Imam Malik or Imam Hanbali, these are opinions given by X, Y, Z experts of Islamic law in 8th, 9th century. Now, can our courts today hold those opinions constitutional? That is the question. Can Indian Supreme Court say, for instance, that John Austin's Y opinion is unconstitutional, or Dworkin's Z opinion is unconstitutional? That is the problem, that only part of Muslim personal law can be called law. So when I deny legality to Muslim personal law in my piece, Illusion of Legality, I am not saying that don't bring in reforms. Bring in reforms. My only suggestion was that bring piecemeal reform. Because if you say uniform civil code, you polarize society, you don't achieve anything. So have reforms in a systematic way, with small doses. Say you start with registration of marriage, or you start with triple divorce, or you start with maintenance, or as you did it in domestic violence. That is the point we are trying to make. So nobody is saying that don't bring in reforms. And to Sherwani Sahab, to respond to him, why repeatedly we are saying, and there are many others, Shireen is also of the same opinion, so is Flavia, that if it is a top-down model, that Supreme Court says triple divorce is banned. You said that if there is 3 years imprisonment, no one will give divorce. There is a death penalty for murder. Rate of murder is rising every year.
Sir,
just let me complete, sir. 2012, to that gruesome rape cum murder in Delhi, we passed this law, Nirbhaya law. We think by increasing punishments, the crime rate goes down. We have friends from US. Thorsten Selin has studied the relationship between crime rate and death penalty to find that there is no relationship at all.
Fine.
Whether you have a heavy punishment or low punishment, it will not impact crime.
Right.
Therefore, the whole question is, unless we prepare our society, and in our society, whether right or wrong, Sherwani Saab, my opinion doesn't hold good. It is the opinion of some mullah who will speak on Friday and give sermon, unless that person says that if you are divorcing, divorce in this manner. Unless that person says triple divorce is wrong, then it will not have an impact. We also are against triple divorce, but we are saying to have meaningful reform, mere Supreme Court decision, because that decision is already there in Shamim Ara in 2012, and 2017 again we are debating it. That is the small point,
Okay,
sir.
First of all, sir, I did not say that I am not against divorce per se. No one is. I did not say that nobody will give divorce. The man will have a choice either to follow the procedure as laid down in Quran, wait for 3 months to complete the talaq, or go to jail for 3 years. Now he will have to make a choice, 3 months or 3 years. I did not say nobody will give divorce. Sir, the problem is that it's a declaratory law. Most of the provisions, even 39 Act, was only brought when things were forced. When women in Punjab, Muslim women in Punjab, they converted into Christianity. And because they converted into Christianity, and mullahs had no power to give the fatwa of cutting their heads, because the Christians were in power at that time. So they were forced to propose this principle, which Tahir Bhai can explain in detail, this right to decide of choice, takhayyur, that you being a Hanfi, the Maliki provisions can be invoked. Other provisions can be. That was the first time. When it became possible? Only when things were forced on them. The proposal originally did not come from them. Things were forced. Now the problem is that this is a declaratory law. 37, a forced situation. 86, government was forced. Without force, government did not bring a 1986 thing. Most of the provisions, they do not have, it is true, they do not have legislative sanction. But the problem is that when you go to the court, then court is pronouncing judgment, not just on matters on which some enactment has been made, even on matters which are declaratory. Now my rights are affected. I feel my fundamental rights have been affected. Where do I go for relief? I will go to the court. So court is deciding those matters in any case. Court is in any case deciding those matters. It may not be law, formal law in that sense, because it does not carry legislative sanction, but courts are already deciding those cases. And uniform civil code, I do not think this is the right time to discuss uniform civil code, because that move has not come from any serious quarter. I was hearing Tahir Bhai he had given a talk at Jamia Millia, Guftugu. I think he said 307 reports Law Commission has so far submitted to the government. They are not even obliged, the government is not obliged even to lay it on the table of the parliament. Only 7 reports government has taken cognizance of. Today, I totally disagree with Mrs. Flavia. This is an occasion when even Muslim personal law board people are not able to defend triple divorce. They are making speeches in the public meetings. For the first time they have started making speeches where they are saying that this problem we have invited ourselves. Even the chairman of the personal law board has made this statement. Because this is bidat and we are doing this. What they are not ready to accept is that government should take the initiative. Supreme Court should take, but now we are trying to create this opinion. So this is the right time. And
sir, you are disagreeing. I am agreeing with that. What is it?
No, part that we should not talk about triple divorce.
No, I know.
Okay, sorry then. Sorry then. If that is the position, then sorry. So to my mind, this is the right time when we should hotly pursue this matter. Even Hindu code bill was adopted in stages. Yes, situation has become ripe. Yes.
If you permit just 1 minute.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please.
I think while talking about...
last question.
Waleed Ansari, Aligarh Muslim, from Aligarh Muslim University. While talking about the Sharia and its interpretation, probably we are forgetting about the ibadat and muamalat. In ibadat, one can have a tick box approach. Like how many times you pray, you tick. But when it comes to the muamalat, man and man relationship, there are gray areas.
Yeah.
And that can be discussed. But not in ibadat, man to God relationship.
You are right.
So I think one should be very careful when talking about this tightrope, walking. Otherwise, what will happen that you will bring into question everything. In ibadat, there is a clear tick box approach you can apply. But in ibadat, there can be discussion, there will be gray areas, we can't be cut and dried. And I think that we are missing this distinction when we are using a broad brush approach to paint entire Sharia as debatable, as can be changeable, and there is nothing, what we call, everything is variable.
That is not the sense in which things have been said. Ibadat is, it's a matter of worship. Nobody is in the, and particularly in this country, where even two brothers do not offer their devotions in the same way. Somebody observes fast on Sunday, the other brother will observe fast. So in this country, nobody is going to interfere. Okay, sir. That was the last question. Okay. Thank you, sir.